Quilting Celebrations with Patrick Lose is brought to you by The Warm Company, manufacturers of the most loved battings and double-stick fusibles for creative people. Janome, what's next? Superior Threads, all your favorite threads. Havel's Sewing, cut it close with Havel's Sewing. And Patrick Lose Studios, designs and inspirations for your quilting celebrations.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Quilting Celebrations with Patrick Lose. I'm here with my friend Kay Caps Cross again. And in the last segment we did straight grain binding on just right angles, square corners. And we've got a little bit more of a challenge with this project. This is a round placemat, and we're going to need to bind a curved edge. That means that we have to cut some bias binding. And I have a way that I learned years and years ago as a costume designer to cut economically bias binding so that you're not taking a width of fabric and just hacking off
so we don't have to take yards and cut those big long pieces?
You know, honestly, with this project, we're going to be able to cut the binding from about a 13-inch square of fabric, the entire piece of binding. Yeah, so it's great. And we're going to jump right into it because this is a little bit tricky and takes a little bit of time. So Kay, I'm going to teach you how to do this. And if you would, just take the tape measure, and we're going to measure the circumference, first of all, of the project that we need to bind. This is what you'll do with any project that you need to determine the amount of fabric that you have to make binding from. So,
about 24 inches, halfway around.
Yep, 24 would be half, so we'll just double that. So 48 inches then is the circumference of this project. Now, just to be on the safe side, I always add 10 inches.
It's love
arbitrary.
fudge room.
Yeah, I do too. And
gotta have fudge room.
We're still not using a lot of fabric, so it's okay to add 10 inches to the beginning and 10 inches to the end of this binding strip that we're going to create, and that makes it 68 inches. So what we're really trying to do is find the area of the fabric that is going to take to bind this placemat.
Okay, that's going to be math, isn't it?
It is math, but it's a simple calculator trick.
Do I have enough fingers and toes?
You don't even need to worry about your fingers and toes. So
good.
We're just going to go to, I've got a calculator app here. And so let's clear that out. So we had 68 inches was the circumference plus the beginning and end fudge room. So we're going to take 68.
Because we're going to be messing with it at the end too, right?
Yeah, to connect the tails together. You need, you need to have enough to do that. So we've got 68 inches. I always cut my bindings 2 1/4 inches wide. So we're going to multiply 68 by 2 1/4. That's 2.25.
Okay.
Now that's how we get the area that we need.
I'm with you so far.
Okay. That measurement is 153 inches. Now the next thing that I say always puts quilters in my classes in a daze. They're like, what? And all it is you need to take the square root of 153. That's just this button right here.
Oh, that's easy.
I just tap that, and it's 12.3693, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't matter. You will always round up. So for this project, to bind this circle, we're going to need a 13-inch square of fabric.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so let me show you how that happens.
Okay. It's really going to go all the way around there.
It will, yeah. It works great. There's a square of fabric there that's already cut for you, 13 inches. And now what you're going to do is cut from the upper left to the lower right corner diagonally.
Okay.
Just place your acrylic ruler there and cut from point to point.
Always close your blade.
That's right. And it's really important to always do this the same way. It can be confusing if you don't do it very often, but if you just always cut the same diagonal and treat the fabric the same way each time, it's easier to remember. So
would be a good visual for those of us that are visual learners.
I'm a very visual learner. Yep. So we're going to take the left side, the raw edge, and bring it over to the right side, right sides together. There we go. Okay, and then we do offset it just a little bit there.
Like about your 1/4 inch?
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more than that, but that's okay, that's close. And I'm just going to take it over here to the machine. We're going to just do a 1/4 inch seam in that.
I actually like that shape. I love triangles.
got a little bit off there, but I think we're okay. We've already got one made anyway. So what we would do next then is just take this to the ironing board. We're going to press this seam open, okay?
All right.
We've already got one there. And now we'll take this one that we've pressed open, and we're just going to, from the bottom, from the raw edge on the bottom, we're going to draw lines every 2 1/4 inches parallel to each other.
And I'm going to use a marker that's going to have a little thickness, right? So I want to make sure I compensate.
Take that down just
compensate for that
right.
thickness of the marker.
Right. We do want to be as accurate as possible. We should be able to get 4 2 1/4 inch wide strips up the width of this fabric, which is 9 inches. So, but we just cheat it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to get the width. If I use the width of it, I should be good.
And one more. And it looks like we did it. That looks like
good.
2 1/4 remaining there. Okay.
All right.
And now, this part is very important because, again, it's a visual thing that you just, the more you do it, the more you'll visually remember what you've done. And what I do is I turn the fabric right side up. Okay. And you're going to bring one of these ends to the other, matching the lines. Now you see how those line up? But if we were to sew this together, which we're going to do here, and then cut these, you're going to have tubes.
We're going to have a bunch of headbands.
4 headbands, exactly.
That's not going to work very well.
No. So what we really need to do here is to offset these lines by 1. Do you see how that's, you can kind of see how it's going to work. I'm going to take this to the sewing machine though and actually stitch this. And the important thing here is that we need to make these lines match up by actually crisscrossing them.
Oh, that's right, to get that seam allowance, don't we?
Yes, because you've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but you still want the lines to match up. So I've got the line on this side, and then on this side it crisscrosses. So if I were to take a pin and put it through at a 1/4 inch, you can see that that's
You've done
pretty
that
much dead on.
Once or twice, haven't you?
Yeah, so I'm not even going to bother using pins.
I wouldn't.
Because it does, if you just sort of...
And it looks a little goofy there, but I like how you showed me that you lay it flat first, so it makes sense,
right,
and then shift it.
It gives you a good visual reminder of what it's supposed to look like when you...
Doesn't look quite so discombobulated.
Right, even though it kind of is.
Yeah, it kind of is, but...
And see, I'm keeping those raw edges together as I sew this because we don't want to get them caught underneath.
No, that could be enough to throw you off, couldn't it?
Oh yeah, well, make a big tangled mess too. Okay. And now when I open this up, you can see that those lines all...
Yes. Look at that.
All match.
Wow, you nailed it.
Good.
You absolutely nailed it.
And then we just need to press this open, which I will go do at the ironing board.
All right.
Okay, so there it is with the seams pressed open, and now all we have left to do is to cut this. And if I
You do press beautifully, by the way, Patrick.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome.
So if I just start cutting on that line, and honestly, I am going to say a little something about our sponsor scissors here because...
Are they as good as the other ones?
Oh my God, they're... the thing that I love about these is if you're using, and I love my stainless steel scissors too, and Havel's makes great stainless steel scissors, but if you use them cutting this, the fabric has a tendency to slip out of the stainless steel blades, and you don't want that. You really need to be cutting on this line to make sure that your binding is 2 1/4 inches wide.
Right, you go a little bit off and that will make a difference.
And I just did, you probably noticed that.
I won't tell anybody.
Okay. Well, I have ways of cheating too that'll fix that when we sew it onto the project.
And are those handles as easy to get your hands in as these are?
They are. I mean, I have large fingers, and it's really nice to have scissors that have large enough holes for a guy who likes to quilt.
So you don't get stuck in there.
Right. So you can see how, I mean, you can almost hear the...
You can actually hear it.
The scissors grabbing that fabric. The serrated edge just holds that fabric in place while I'm cutting. And there we go. And see, because I offset those by 1, we've got one long continuous.
Wow, and 2 1/4 from beginning to end. That's really cool.
So that's how we make the one piece. Now we're going to have to go to the ironing board and fold this in half and press it just like we're working with a straight grain binding. So I'll go do that.
Alrighty.
So there's our bias binding, continuous length of it, all pressed and folded and treated just like a straight grain binding from this point on.
Really?
Everything we do, yeah, is going to be just like straight binding.
And so thank you for pressing that quickly. I missed you while you were gone.
Thank you for giving me this, and we're going to get the binding on it right away. And again, I'm not going to use pins because it just works better for me. And
with the bias now, we've got all that give.
There's
right?
There's a little bit of play, and if you're a beginner working with bias, you do want to be careful, and you might pin as you're learning how to do this, because bias binding can be stretched out of shape, and it will hold that stretch. So you don't want to sew it on already stretched, because then it doesn't conform to the shape that you're trying to bind. So I'm just going to start about 6 or 8 inches in, maybe.
Oh, we're going to need that tail.
Yeah, the tail is for joining.
Okay.
And when you join the ends, it's just like joining a straight edge binding or straight grain binding. So you can just refer to the segment that we did on straight grain binding to do that, because we're not going to do that right now.
So you're lining up your edges just like you do with straight grain.
Yep, exactly. The raw edges, you just put them together, and you can see how it, just because it's cut on the bias, it just kind of conforms and smooths itself to the edge of the placemat.
And you don't need to stretch or scrunch it, you just let it, let it ease on?
That's right. Okay. And I always sew all the way to the end where it meets up with, so I've started there, and I'm going to bring this piece to meet that one. And I'll just stop my stitching there. So you can see there that what's going to happen, because it was bias, I sewed it all the way, because that can stretch and be sort of irregular.
Oh,
but
you want to control it a little bit.
A little bit, because this is where I want my, or not necessarily where I want my binding to begin and end, but I need to look, because in a bias binding cut like this and made like this, there's more seams in it. I don't want a bunch of seams to run into each other.
Oh,
and see, there's one right there that was going to happen. So honestly, we're not going to join this now. We've showed that in the straight grain binding section. But I would pull this back to about here so that I can stitch this on and, you know, make those come together without two seams, one right in front of the other.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so it's really very simple. It's from this point on, it's basically just you're treating it as the same way that you would a straight grain binding. So I hope we've answered all your questions about binding in this episode, and I want to thank you, Kay, for being with me to help teach our viewers.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And join us next time on Quilting Celebrations with Patrick Lose.
Quilting Celebrations with Patrick Lose is brought to you by The Warm Company, manufacturers of the most loved battings and double-stick fusibles for creative people. Janome, what's next? Superior Threads, all your favorite threads. Havel's Sewing, cut it close with Havel's Sewing. And Patrick Lose Studios, designs and inspirations for your quilting celebrations.